All right, so I am going live. I'm trying something new right now, and I am live on my phone and also on my laptop. So hopefully, for those of you who are watching everywhere but Instagram, you can see me, and I'm not like too close because I'm looking at two different screens right now. But I wanted to have a conversation about starting a business while working full time, and I wanted to do that because I keep getting questions about all of this. So, hey to everybody who's joining, Amy, and let's see, English 214, and it's a couple people joining on multiple platforms. So, thank you all for listening. I wanted to have this conversation about starting a business while working full time because I get asked a lot about how it looks and why I do it and how I do it and all of that. So, I want to just talk to y'all about that a bit and answer any questions if you have them. So if you're watching on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube, drop a comment below and hopefully I will see your comment and I can give you some just insights and information if you're looking for that. And also on Instagram. Hey, how are you doing, Edith? It's good to see you. And hey again, the Black Girl Billionaire, who is a Clemson University undergraduate student and doing all kinds of amazing things. So I want to tell you a little bit about my story and my background, and then how and why I ended up starting a business, why I'm doing it, how I'm doing it, and answer your questions. So I'm Shantavia Johnson, and for years, I have been doing a lot of the wrong things, which is why I want to have this conversation. But I'm an intellectual property lawyer by training, and I have done a lot of things over the years. I've worked at a big firm, I have worked in a law school, I've done temporary work in a law school. I have, well, right now, I'm a university administrator in addition to doing some of these other things. So I have lived a lot of lives. I also have an engineering degree. And hey, Stephanie at LinkedIn, thank you for joining. And as I've had all these different careers, like many of you, I've always known I'm good at a few different things. You know, like if you look in your DMs or look in your text messages, or that family member who's always asking for your opinion about something or asking for advice about something, you know, that shows you that you have some knowledge that people want, right? If people are always asking you to speak at church, or they're always asking you to do something for your sorority or whatever it is, that means you have something that's valuable. So I always felt like I had something that was valuable. I didn't know how to turn it into a business, but I like spent a lot of time kind of figuring that part out. And so for me, where this whole journey started, I was working in my first job at a law firm, and the first day was bad and it was downhill from there. So if you've ever been in that position where a position you have had has just been like not great, drop a one in the chat or wave at me or something so I know that I'm not by myself. Although for those of you who are watching on LinkedIn, don't let nobody at your job see you saying you don't like your current position. But that job just was not for me. And it wasn't really the work or the firm or anything like that. Like, there were some things I actually really liked about it. I could just tell that it was not the environment specifically for me. It was the job everybody told me I should take. It was the job where I thought it was the right thing to do because it was a lot of money. It was a lot of this. It was a lot of that. People were impressed by it. It gave me a certain financial lifestyle. The first job I had out of law school, I was making $145,000 a year, which was more money than most people in my family had ever made. And so people thought, like, oh, well, that's the thing you ought to do. That's like, you have made it. You could buy a house. You could buy this. I traveled all the time. And so I thought it was like, it was cool, but it just really was not the position for me. So I was in this position for about 2 years or so. And one day I just quit. I quit on April Fool's Day. And when I quit on April Fool's Day, I cut all my hair off. I ended the relationship I was in. I went to South Africa for like 3 months and just like did all kinds of things. It was one of those things where I was just cutting everything off. And hey, Dr. Walls, I've heard you talk about things like this in some of your content, leaving bad relationships and leaving bad opportunities. So I left this opportunity that on paper looked really, really good. It was like the thing all my classmates in law school had kind of aspired toward. It was what I aspired toward, frankly. It was the thing that I thought I should be doing. And when it wasn't, I walked away. I went to South Africa for a while, had no plan at all. And ultimately, I ended up taking a $100,000 pay cut to take a position when I came back to the US in New Orleans. And I took this position in New Orleans. It was interesting. I was teaching at a law school in like a temporary capacity. And sorry, it's loud outside my door if you hear that. But it was interesting in part because I had left a very high paying job for this particular role. And it felt better and I enjoyed the work. I was living in an amazing city, but I really felt like I wasn't quite there yet. And what I really wanted to do when I quit the first job at the law firm was start a business. But I was too scared. I felt like I didn't know enough. I felt like I didn't have enough training. I didn't have enough credentials. I didn't have this, that, or blah, 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 whatever. So I was too scared to do it. I didn't have the mindset. I had the desire, but I did not have the mindset to do it. And I've heard Dr. Walls, I've heard you talk about this, about just not being ready for certain shifts and not being ready for whatever that thing is. So I got scared and took this job making $100,000 less than what I was, almost $100,000 less than what I was making at the firm. And I thought then, I really actually need to start a business now because I'm making so much less money. And I didn't know how I was going to keep the house because I still had a house in the city where I was living before. I was maintaining a home in New Orleans. I was maintaining all kinds of things that were very expensive things. So I started a business then. And this was maybe, 2008 or 2009 or maybe 2009 or so. And I didn't know what I was doing. I made all the mistakes. I made all the financial mistakes. I also made the mistake that I think a lot of new entrepreneurs make, which is I would do basically anything legal, anything that didn't violate my morals and ethics and all that. So one week I might be helping somebody with a real estate closing. One minute I might be, I think I drafted like a prenuptial agreement. I would help people with their contracts. I would help them with their trademarks. And I think women of color, especially, we do this a lot. We are willing to do anything that somebody's willing to pay us for as we're growing our business within, ethical and whatever realms, because we feel like that's what we have to do because we're just getting started. We also work for free a lot. And I did that too. I worked a lot for free for other people when I probably shouldn't have been working for free because I really did have skills and all that. I just didn't know what to do with them. And so over the past 12 or 13 years or so, I really have been working to figure out entrepreneurship. And it's like ebbed and flowed. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've left it for a while and come back to it, and growing my brand too, the same kind of thing. And so when I talk about starting a business while working full time, I know this is a process. I know it's not something that's easy. I know it's something where you feel like I just don't have time to add anything else to my schedule. I don't have time to add anything else to my plate. So I get it. I get feeling a pull to do something more, but not really knowing how to do it. And it has taken me a long time. And I feel like too, for a lot of people, we see the overnight success. I was watching this little girl on YouTube earlier today who's I grew to 100,000 followers in less than a year. And that can be intimidating too, right? You see people doing these kinds of things and it feels scary and it feels like something that is not attainable. But I wanted to have this conversation because I want people to know, especially women of color who want to grow their brands, who want to grow their businesses. First, you don't really have to have a huge following to get really dope, amazing opportunities, number one. And number two, there are quicker paths to success. And that's one of the reasons I do the work I do, because I don't want it to take you 12 years to get to certain points. Hey, Kanika, thank you so much for joining. And so Kanika Tolver, who is watching in the comments, is a person who's done this really well. She's a person who's worked a full-time job, gotten an amazing book deal, is growing her brand, doing all kinds of things. And the work that she does and the work that I do, I feel like we both are doing that work so that we can be of service to other people, so we can help people realize it is possible to have like whatever the full-time job is. It's possible to grow your business and grow your brand at the same time. And it's possible to like both. Hey, Francine, thank you for joining. It is possible to have both. And it's possible to have both in a way where you are not working 24 hours a day. So I want to give you just some tips and suggestions as you are growing your businesses and growing your brands or thinking about it. Ways you can get started right now and things you need to be thinking about. Because the other thing too, like I mentioned to you all earlier, I made all the mistakes, all the mistakes, and I don't want that to happen to you. So if you're watching, no matter where you're watching, if you don't want to make mistakes or if you've made some mistakes, drop a 1 in the chat so I know you're here. I know that you're a person who is feeling kind of like I felt or sometimes how I feel today. Drop a 1 in the chat if you've made some mistakes, if you want to learn how to avoid mistakes that I have made, that other people have made. Drop a 1 in the chat so I know you're there watching and listening. Thank you for joining, Chris and Dr. Ross, D. Ross, it looks like, and Vicky Works. Thank y'all so much for watching. I see some ones in the chat on Instagram. I'm seeing some ones in the chat on some other platforms. So here's one of the first things when you are getting started. I'm talking about like before day 0, before you even say I'm taking the plunge, right? One of the first things you should do is at your full-time job, the job that pays you, the absolute first thing before you tell anybody anything, before you do anything, check your conflicts of interest policy. And it might be called something else at your job. It might be called a moonlighting policy. It might be called an ethics policy. It might be called conflicts of interest. But they're probably at your employer, especially if you work for a relatively large employer. There's some policy that says, here's what you can do as an employee of our company or our institution or whatever. And a lot of firms do this and a lot of companies do this, or universities or whoever, because they know you're multifaceted. They know there's a certain population of people who is going to want to do something else outside of their day-to-day job. And there's any number of reasons why you want to do that, but check your conflicts of interest policy first before you make any moves. And I say that because that policy is going to say, here's what we accept as a company. Here's what we accept as an institution. Here's what we accept as the government or whatever. And that's your starting point, right? Like, do not get fired trying to start a side hustle. And if you get fired, you do what you have to do, but try not to get fired starting your side hustle, because that is like the worst place to start from when you're really hungry and you don't have, you can't keep the lights on and all that. For those of us who have full-time jobs, who need them, you don't want to get in trouble before you get out the gate, right? And the other reason why you want to check your policies, your conflicts policy, moonlighting policy, ethics policy, and it may be here and it may be somewhere else, but also you want to make sure you own your intellectual property. So many of us, when we start our side hustles or our second jobs, I don't like to call them side hustles, so I feel like many of us put just as much time, if not more, into the other thing. But you want to make sure you own your intellectual property. And there's some defaults in a lot of employment agreements, and there's some defaults in a lot of ethics policies or conflicts policies or whatever. And there's some defaults in the law about who owns your intellectual property. So if you're coming up with something really, really amazing, and it's sort of kind of looks like the work you do every day for your employer, you want to ensure that you're not creating something that at some point they can make claim to or they can say they own. And this is a huge problem for entrepreneurs who are just getting started. There are many, many instances where we start something not realizing, especially if you're doing it on company time or on a company laptop, where it looks like something you do day in and day out, you could actually lose your intellectual property and not have anything to show for all the work you're doing, because your employer could come to you and say, hey, we actually own that. And that happened recently. That happened a few weeks ago. I guess it's been a month or so ago now, with an influencer named Haley Page, who was building an Instagram page using her name, her actual name, on her employer's behalf. And now that Instagram page has grown, like exponentially grown, with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers. And now her employer is saying, hey, that actually belongs to us. And you agreed to it. You signed a document saying we own that. And you don't want that to be you. You do not want to be in that position as a new entrepreneur. So that's the first thing. Check your conflicts policy, your moonlighting policy, your ethics policy. The second thing, once you know those things, once you know what those policies say, then you go talk to your employer, whoever signs your checks or approves your retention or is your supervisor or your boss or whatever. You talk to them about that, about what you desire to do, knowing what the rules are already. So, like, don't go in without knowing what the rules are, right? Go in understanding what those rules are and then have that conversation about what you plan to do. And this is something that I have done with my current employer. Before I even took the position, I said, hey, this is something that I do. Are you okay with it? How can we get okay with it if you're not? And it worked out fine. But you want to do that again, somewhat because of your employer. You don't want to get fired, for having a side hustle or for running afoul of the rules. But also, you want to own the things you create. And intellectual property law and your employment agreements are not in your favor oftentimes around your IP. So you want to make sure you know what that means. And by your IP, I mean your trademarks, your copyrights, your patents, trade secrets, maybe all these different things that fall in the umbrella of intellectual property. You want to make sure when you're creating these things, you own them. And so that is just like foundational stuff to me. This is not something people want to do oftentimes, but I feel like, if you're afraid to talk to your boss about it or your supervisor about it now, I mean, they're going to see you on Twitter. They're going to find you on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, or whatever when you're talking about these things. So you might as well have the conversation up front. And if they say this is not something we're comfortable with, then you have to make a choice, yourself at that point. But I don't think anybody should go broke trying to get rich. I think you should create the right foundation so that you can get rich and grow your brand at your business at the same time without going broke. So do those things. Check your conflicts policies and all that, then talk to your supervisor, your boss, or whatever. And I know there are some people watching right now who are college students. I see a couple of you in the comments. College students, when you are taking a new job, like, think about these things when you're negotiating with your new employer. Thank you, Takara, for saying that's so very true. It is like, these are the things you have to think about when you're getting started. And it is just the smartest thing that you can do, because you do not want to end up getting stopped before you get out of the gate. The next thing, and this is something that I think some entrepreneurs do really well, some are horrible at. I was one who was horrible at this, and it ended up costing me a lot of time, energy, mental health, and money, is focus. Focusing. And I teach something called the rule of one. Some of you have heard me use this term before. The rule of one means pursue one business idea, sell to one person, and sell one product. I don't think you should be out here trying to braid hair on the weekends, do your blog during the week, writing resumes on Tuesday, baking cakes on Thursday, and doing speaking engagements on Monday, and adding in, like, I don't know what else, like changing people's tires 3 days a week or whatever. I don't think that is the best way to get started when you have a full-time job, because you're busy, because you don't have a ton of time, because you need rest. My friend Kanika Tolver, who is watching, like, I hear her say this all the time: get your rest, because you're no good to anybody else if you're not good to yourself. And so that rule of one, that focusing, is really, really hard for people to do. People think, oh, I need to sell multiple products. I need to have multiple streams of income. I need this, I need that. I need to be able to say yes to everything because I'm early. It's got to be cheap. It's got to be free. It's got to be blah, 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 blah. And I don't think that's true at all. I think you do yourself a disservice when you take that approach, because you're busy. You are busy. You have a life, you have a job, you might have a spouse, you have a social life, you might have fraternities and sororities, a family, or whatever you have. And focusing is so, so, so important. And if you have questions, please drop those questions in the chat. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you might have about any of this stuff. But that rule of one, pursuing one business idea, selling to one person, and selling one product, even if you don't have a full-time job, frankly, focusing is one of the most important things you can do for yourself and for your business. And people balk when I say this, especially the part about focusing on one person and on one client and one customer. But what I mean by that is not literally one person, but I mean finding the characteristics of that ideal customer, that ideal person who is not just going to follow you on social media, who's not just going to buy from you once, though you do want them to buy from you, but someone who's going to buy from you multiple times, and somebody who's going to tell other people about you. And frankly, that third part, telling other people about you, is almost more important than selling to them once or selling to them many times, because, we don't know who each other knows. And it's so, you just never know who knows whoever else, even if like Boo Boo doesn't know who or knows who you are but can't afford you. Boo Boo might be best friends with Michelle Obama. Boo Boo might know somebody else who can hire you. And so you really want to focus on these ideal customers, these ideal clients, that one person, and serving people really, really well. Because when your message is clear and when you know who you're talking to, you never know who's going to share that message with other people, right? And so Takara says she's even removed items from her website because she thought she was doing too much. And that's a little bit counterintuitive, and that can be pretty scary, especially when you're selling products and services, because you need to keep your lights on, and because you need to make payroll, and because you need to be of service to other people. But getting focused and getting really, really good systems is one of the most important things you can do. And so the rule of one, I cannot say enough about that rule of one, about making sure you're focusing on one idea, selling to one person, and selling one product. And the other thing too around systems, so I mentioned building systems around that rule of one, around your focus area. Systems are incredibly, incredibly important. So one of the ways I do a lot of the things I do, so like folks ask me often, like, how do you have time to do all of these different things? And the answer really is systems. It's help and it's systems. It's having good help and good support, and then also systems. And with the systems in particular, a lot of things are automated for me. Like, I might work hard once, like Rachel Rogers says all the time, work hard once, but I create a ton of systems. And one of the ways I do that is through Zapier. And I don't know if any of you have heard of Zapier, but Zapier is the way that I automate a lot of things. So if someone sends me a text message, or if somebody shoots me an email, or somebody registers for a newsletter to get something free that I have, Zapier allows me to connect across platforms so that I get your information. I can send you automatically emails, or send you videos, or send you other content without me literally being here, like typing the keys, doing all those things. So it looks like, let's see, there's a question. How long do you suggest focusing on one thing before adding on? So my personal recommendation, so there are a couple of things there. There's goal setting. So what are you trying to get with this one thing? So once you set that goal, whatever that is, what I always suggest to people with the rule of one is you focus until you have enough systems in place and enough help in place to where you've met the goal and the systems are working for you, right? Where you are not like the person sending all the emails, where you are the person who is making all the phone calls, when you're the person who's writing all the copy or writing all the blog posts. So my thought is, automate and create enough systems around something so that it's working for you consistently before moving on to something else. So Takara asks, what is the name of it again? Did I say Zapier? So it's Zapier. Zapier.com. And I don't get paid to say that. I should probably for saying it, but I don't get paid to say that. The Zapier has been incredibly useful for me. I think many people who are running businesses online or using significant online components in their business use Zapier or something like it. And again, what Zapier does is it allows you to connect the various platforms that you use. So, like, one example might be when you're growing your email list, when you are giving somebody like a free PDF or a free guide or a free whatever. So, an example of that, if you want to see one, for those of you who are asking, might be what's one that I have? Startmakingcontent.com. So, startmakingcontent.com is a page that I created where I give you like more than 60 different types of content you create. So if you go to startmakingcontent.com right now and you go to that link, the website asks you for your name, asks you for your email address, and once you put that stuff in, you automatically get a series of emails from me that sends you that startmakingcontent.com document. And so you get that while I'm sitting here talking to you. I'm not like behind the screen typing and shooting you that email. But so Zapier connects that, so your name and email address that you've given me there, to other platforms and other services that I might have. So like now it's not that I'm just sending you that one thing. I can send you information from other platforms or other things I've created, or I can shoot you things at regular intervals from other platforms or other things that I've created. Or like if you give me your email address and your cell phone number so I can text you, it connects your cell phone number to Community, which is the text service I use. So I'm not like manually entering your cell phone number into Community to send you a text. And so Zapier does that across a lot of different platforms. And that's really what I mean about creating systems and building systems that allow you to automate as much as possible. So you can do other things. So like if you are requesting things from me at regular intervals, it's hard for me to do this that I'm doing right now, like talking to people live. And that's what systems help you do. And when you have a full-time job, having those systems is just one of the most important things you can have as you are growing while you're also like doing your day job, having the things that you do each and every day for work. You know, like many people during work hours, either you don't work on your side hustle at work. If you are working on your side hustle at work, please be very, very clear on what your conflicts policies are so you don't get fired and you don't lose your intellectual property, of course. But you know, when we're working during the day, who knows when somebody might visit your website or want to place an order or whatever. When you have those systems in place, your website and all the things you created can be working for you while you are collecting, you know, your 6 figures or 5 figures or set whatever you're making in your full-time job. So having those systems in place is really, really, really important. And having help and having a support system. So I was on Clubhouse a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about 6-figure mistakes entrepreneurs make. And one of the mistakes revolves around who's in your support system. Like, what's your spouse look like? What's your significant other look like? How are they supporting you in your business? And if you are in relationship with a person who isn't supporting you so that you can go out and do the things that you're doing, then it's going to be really, really hard for you to start and maintain a business while you're working full time when you don't have the right support system outside of work. I mean, inside of work really too, but outside of work especially. So when I talk about help and support systems, I don't mean just like who you are hiring on Upwork or Fiverr, which I'll talk about in a moment, but I also mean like who are the people in your household? Who are the people who are bigging you up and supporting you and sharing your work on social and sharing your work off social and all that? But then finally, in terms of creating systems, another important thing is don't try to do everything by yourself, which I know like this is really, really hard to do when you're just getting started, you don't have a ton of money, a ton of resources, a ton of, everything, but you can create some really, really amazing relationships with people for not very expensive, so not a whole lot of money, where you can get the kind of help you need. So, like for me, one of the places where I struggle a lot is not with generating content. Like I can make content all day long. I can make videos, blog posts, whatever I'm making, but it's hard for me to sit down and edit and proofread and everything else just because it takes a ton of time. And so instead of me sitting down doing all those things each and every time, I might find somebody who's like a contractor, or if there's a person, so there's one person I have a longer term relationship with who does some copy editing and that kind of thing for me. But you can hire other people and it doesn't necessarily have to break the bank. So, like some services that a lot of people use. So, a lot of people, when you hear them talking about, oh, I have a team on social media, what it means is usually they've hired some contractors. Maybe they have full time employees, but many people have hired contractors. And by contractor, I mean a person you hire just like on a one off basis. So, you might hire somebody on like Upwork.com, UPWORK, and that person might be the person who proofread all your blogs, or it might be the person. So for a while, I had someone who was taking my audio recordings and turning them into transcripts, turning them into short clips I could post on social media and that kind of thing. And that's not a person I found on Upwork, but you can find people like that on Upwork or Fiverr, Fiverr, I think it is. There may be one of the letters missing, but it's Fiverr with two R's on the end. These are instances where you can hire people to help you do some of this stuff where you're not literally doing it on your own. And I tried to do it on my own actually for a long time, like recording the videos, adding the graphics, adding the music, adding all these things to make the videos pretty. But my God, it's a ton of work. And even though like I have an engineering degree, I'm not good at that. I don't know a whole lot about it. I can teach myself just enough to be dangerous, but why not hire somebody? Like I have someone now who does all of my video clips for like $25. She does, I think, two videos for $25, three videos for like $30 or something like that. And I'm not really trying to do all that myself because it's hard. Number one, for me, it's time consuming. And for the rate that I charge by the hour, it doesn't make sense for me to spend 2 hours working on one video when in 2 hours I could probably make $2,000, right? Like it just doesn't make sense for me to spend that kind of time editing videos when I could be out generating revenue. And so using things like Upwork and Fiverr have been really, really helpful for me. Another thing that's really helpful for me so I do actually make some of so some of like the images and that kind of thing I do make on my own. And I use something called Canva. And many of you, I'm sure, have heard of Canva, Canva, Canva. But Canva allows you to edit audio. Well, not really edit, but allows you to make like beautiful visual content. So like PDFs, videos, audio, images, pictures. It allows you to make really beautiful content. And so oftentimes when you see people on like Instagram or YouTube or whatever who have really pretty thumbnails or really pretty cover images, they're using Canva to do that. And there's some benefits and drawbacks to using Canva versus like an Adobe Illustrator or whatever. But those services will allow you, especially when you're working full time, right, to say, okay, here's something I need quickly. Either I have the money to do it or I don't. And if you don't have a ton of money and you need to make things yourself, you want them to look nice, but looking nice is relative, right? But if you want things to look nice, Canva allows you to do some of those things. But the other thing too, I would say about growing a brand online when you're working full time, it doesn't have to be pretty. It does not have to be beautiful. It does not have to be glossy and high def and perfect. And that is a common misconception. Like, think about all the people you follow on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, on Instagram, on YouTube, or whatever. Maybe some of them have really, really beautiful things, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them are doing exactly what you'll do, which is turn on your phone or your camera or whatever, sit in your house and record something. And that is okay. It is okay to do those things. And you can really grow. Like, a lot of the people I follow with millions of followers, they may have a ton of help doing their content and all that, but it's not perfect. It's not beautiful. Everything isn't, exactly perfect in every instance. There's typos, there's this, there's that. And so you can really create some really amazing content and some really amazing brand signals for yourself without spending a ton of money. And it looked like there was a question up here. Let me just see. There was a question about video. Oh, so the person who does my videos, her name is Kay, and Kay is on Fiverr. I actually didn't find her on Fiverr, but I've hired her through Fiverr. And I need to put it in the chat. I'll make sure on Instagram, I'll put her in my stories. On the other platforms, I'll drop a link to her in the chat because she's amazing. K Revolution, I think, is what she goes by on Fiverr. She's based in Kenya. She is amazing. I found her from a client, and she does really, really amazing video editing work. So yeah, she's amazing. So a lot of people are saying they need Kay. I'm gonna find her right now on Fiverr and let y'all know where she is, because she really is amazing. And when you find people like that on social, on various platforms, take note of where they are. Make sure you continue to follow them and connect with them, because those are the people, once you do have a payroll and you do have a huge budget, those can be some of the first people you hire, right? And I am going to add the link in the chat. So I just added her link in the chat on YouTube. And for those of you who are on Fiverr, she's just K Revolution. So Kay Revolution on Fiverr. And she really, really, like, I found her to be amazing. I added her in the chat on Facebook and YouTube, and I'll post it in my stories on Instagram for those of you who are watching on Instagram. So these are some of the strategies you can use when you're starting your business while you're working full time. So the things about your conflicts of interest policy, I cannot stress those things enough, especially because of your intellectual property. So in the last couple of minutes, I said I would do this for like 30 minutes or so, 30 or 40 minutes, and we're coming up on like the 40-minute mark. But your intellectual property, let me just hit on that really quickly. So the default in the law with copyrights and with patents. So when you're making visual content or writing things or inventing something, the default in the law is typically that, well, really for copyrights, let's start there, is your employer, if you're doing things within the scope of your employment, your employer owns the intellectual property you've created. Patent law is different when you're inventing things. The inventor typically is the owner of the invention. But if you're inventing things at work, you probably have an agreement that says your employer owns everything when you're doing that within the scope of your employment, when you're inventing things. So you want to be so careful about what you're creating within the scope of your employment. And it's a very complicated kind of analysis, but basically some good rules of thumb. When you are creating things and you have a full-time job and you're creating things for your side hustle or your second job that you're creating or your business, don't do it at work, as tempting as it might be, unless you have an agreement with your employer that states otherwise. Do not do it at work as an employee. Do not use their laptop as an employee, again, unless you have an agreement stating otherwise. Do not use their resources. So if there's some service you get because of the nature of your work and you want to use it for your side hustle, Do not do that unless you have an agreement in writing or something in writing saying your employer does not own those things. Because otherwise, and I've seen this happen actually, where a person has created something really amazing, like a training program, for example, with videos and handouts and everything else, and they want to use it for their side hustle. And the employer says, nah, I own the copyright in that, and you cannot go out and do whatever you're going to do on your own. And so it does happen. Same with social media accounts. If you're like posting things on behalf of your employer and doing that consistently and all that, you may have something in writing that says they own it. And we've seen this happen a lot of times. So like with podcasts, even people who are creating podcasts for a podcast network, there have been many instances. So one of my favorite podcasts used to be called Another Round, and it was these two Black women who worked for BuzzFeed, and some things happened. I don't know all the details of what went down, but when they left BuzzFeed kept their intellectual property in their podcast, even though it was the two of them on in audio on the microphone week after week. BuzzFeed kept their intellectual property. It happens with television. It happened to Melissa Harris Perry when she had her show on television, and she had some type of employment agreement or some contract where the employer, MSNBC, I presume, or whoever, owned the intellectual property. And so you don't really want to end up in that kind of situation, which is why I say it's really, really important. So there's a question, what about at universities? Universities are an employer. It depends on if you're a student or if you are an employee. I would say there, look at the conflicts of interest policy, start there, because things are different at every university, of course, but I would say start with the conflicts of interest policy. If you're a student, look at like intellectual property policies. Typically, universities have some type of language about whether you can even run a business like out of a dorm room or on campus and that kind of thing. So you really, really have to be careful about all of that. Public and private schools, they also have a little bit of a different rule and a little bit of a different way of handling a lot of these things. And so make sure before you get started, you do all of this. A lot of people don't, and I understand why, but oftentimes, like, it's never a problem until something goes wrong, and you don't want to be in a position where something goes wrong and really is harmful ultimately to your business and to your brand and to your intellectual property. So if there aren't other questions, I see some other questions. Let me make sure I answered all the questions in the chat. If you have questions, make sure you drop them in the chat. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have about any of this stuff. So I see there's one question about accounting and about like whether you should, when you're getting started, what you should do with your money and all of that. So I don't care where you work. I don't care whether you have a full-time job or not. There are 3 very good rules of thumb about money. The first is find a good accountant. Find a good accountant. Find a good accountant. And I'm talking about like day zero. And some people will like balk at this. Some people will say, oh, it's too early. You don't need to do that. And there are a couple of reasons why I think it's important, very, very important to start with an accountant, even if it's just like an initial consultation. The first thing is you can make really expensive mistakes up front with the type of business structure you choose, with whether you are taking all the right steps to get established. You can make very expensive accounting mistakes if you don't know what you're doing. And so some of the things you can do to get started, I'm not an accountant. I work with one. I had a very long meeting with my accountant today, but create a separate business bank account. Don't ever take money in your business and put it in your personal bank account. Create a separate business bank account with your business's name and tax ID number. So that's the second thing. Get a tax ID number. And then so I guess that's 3 things actually. Get an accountant, talk to an accountant, get a business bank account, get a tax ID number, and that's federal and state. So most places you need both a federal tax ID number or EIN number, employer identification number, and a state tax ID number or EIN, whatever it's called in your state. You want to do those 3 things. If you don't, You can make very expensive mistakes. I have made very, very expensive mistakes in the early days that took me years to untangle. Some I am just untangling in the past, like less than a year or so. Mistakes I made 8, 9 years ago. So don't commingle your funds. Thank you very much, Mr. Generette. Don't commingle your funds by putting your business money into a personal bank account or vice versa. And it's not just about money and taxes, it's about keeping liability protection, which is a whole thing I don't have time to get into tonight. But when you commingle your money, when you aren't clear about where money goes, your personal account and your business account, you can lose the protection that, like if you have an LLC, you lose the protection that an LLC provides you when you're commingling your money. So do not, do not, do not do that. And as you are taking all these steps, it's just, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to talk to an accountant. I was in a conversation, I don't know, maybe a month ago about mistakes entrepreneurs make. And it was a conversation about money. And there were so many people in this space. This was a virtual space who have made 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, literally 9 figures. And almost everybody in this conversation said accounting and taxes were one of the biggest mistakes they made when they were getting started. And so even if you just have a side hustle while you're working your day job and all you want to do is make an extra 500 or $1,000 a month, take these steps. Treat your business like a big corporation from day one, even if it's just you, even if you don't have any employees, even if you're not making a whole lot of money. And you really have to treat yourself like a corporation from jump. And so Chris has made a suggestion. Thank you very much, Chris, for this suggestion of reaching out to SCORE. So SCORE is an organization that helps small businesses, and it certainly can be very helpful when you have a good mentor. It's retired business executives. There's classes, there's workshops. You can get matched with mentors. What I have found is SCORE works very well for some people. So like Chris is mentioning on Facebook, that SCORE has worked really well for her. SCORE does not always work well for folks. And I do think it's worth trying in organizations like SCORE. I think they're different all around the US. I've worked with SCORE in, 4 or 5 different states. At this point, some are way better than others. I have found that, it really is mentor dependent. So when you find a really good mentor through SCORE or wherever, hold on to them, because it can be a challenge to find that kind of person. So SCORE certainly is a place that is worth using as a new business owner. Another is the SBDC, the Small Business Development, it's a corporation, SBDC. They have those locally too, but get the resources you need to take the steps you need to take in your business. Even when you are working for somebody else full time, it is so important to start thinking about yourself very seriously as a business owner. So thank y'all for joining me for these 30 or 40 minutes, however long I've been talking. Make sure you hit that follow button. Make sure you hit that notification button if you're on Instagram so you can get notices when I do this. I'm going to start going live more frequently so I can just chop it up with folks and share information about entrepreneurship and about intellectual property. And DM me too if you have questions. Make sure you holler at me. Let me know what questions you have so we can get those answered for you. Thanks.